Hi loves, and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Joycy and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, I wanted to do a get ready with me video talking about cultural identity and where are you from. So this new series, I call it Make Up Your Reality. So I will be doing my makeup while talking about a topic of my interest. So there is ethnicity, cultural identity and geographic location, and all three can be the same or all can be different. So I'm Cape Verdean. If you've been following me for a while, you already know this. And being Cape Verdean automatically means that I have a mixed heritage. So I'm not mixed by my parents, but I have a mixed heritage through my ancestors. So for those who don't know, Cape Verde is located on the west of Africa, next to Senegal under the Canary Islands, and it was colonized by the Portuguese, and we became independent in 1975 thanks to Amilcar Cabral. And Amilcar Cabral was named the second most influential leader by BBC this year, and I voted, of course. And so in my ancestry I have Portuguese, of course. I would say that probably all, if not all, most Cape Verdeans have Portuguese blood. Spanish, my cousin said we have 1%, Cape Verdeans have 1%. Senegal, we also have North African blood, so a lot of Cape Verdeans don't know this, but we also have Moroccan ancestors. In Tunisia there is a street called Rue du Cap Vert, which means Cape Verde Street, so there's also ancestry there. A friend of mine did on the other hand also have Irish Jewish ancestors. I can see that in my mom because she looks like an Irish woman even though she's also full-blood Cape Verdean. Then a friend of mine who's also Cape Verdean did a DNA test on her brother. She had Maasai in Kenya, which I know that most Cape Verdeans also have because of the plaid fabric, and that's the fabric that we used for bedcloths, so that's how I know that there was a link there. They also had a lot of Scandinavian blood as well, because a lot of people forget about this, but they also colonized a lot of places before. And my aunt says we also have French blood. I don't know about that, could be. Then so the first people in Cape Verde were from Guinea-Bissau, at least that's what most people say, so also have that. Then one of the first people that were brought to Cape Verde were from Central Africa, so also have, and we also have people from Angola. So it's really like this huge mix of so many places, so many cultures. Also India, because you have to think of the route that the Portuguese took and all that they brought back, and they also stopped in Cape Verde. So Cape Verde was a pivotal location when it came to the slave trade because it's at the intersection of Europe, Africa and the American continent. So every boat that crossed over stopped in Cape Verde, including people in Brazil, Martinique, Guadeloupe, which I discovered last year. So we are connected through that. So that is my ethnicity, which is a lot. So a lot of times when people ask me where are you from, they don't know. I've heard so many things, and so that's for my ethnicity. And one of the reasons we're also mixed is not only because of the slave trade, but because the Portuguese and the Spanish used Cape Verde as an open laboratory where they did human experiments to see what would happen if a white person and a black person had a baby. So they raped a lot of women, and they also made black men rape white women. And I learned about this last year. A lot of people don't know. So now when it comes to think of it, a lot of people want to be mixed, but it has really a dark history. And because of this rich mix of people who were kidnapped and dropped there. I have like a mix from all over the place, and it allows me to connect with different cultures easily because I have all these cultures in my bloodline, in my ancestry. And it also allowed me, one of the reasons I speak so many languages is because I knew of this. So for me, I always saw this as untapped genes. So a lot of our genes, we don't understand so many things of it, but it also has to do with it. And I feel such a strong connection also with Brazil and with Portugal, because it was the colonizer, but it's still embedded in our culture. And also Angola, Martinique, Guadeloupe, through the music. Even though we're across the oceans, we were still connected through the music. And so that is part of my ethnicity. So when it comes to my cultural identity, the thing is, like, so the cultural identity can have to do with like the products you use, where you live, could have an influence or not, depends on how you go about it, about who you interact with, the music you listen to, the media you consume, the food you eat. It can have so many influences. So I grew up in a Moroccan neighborhood, so that definitely had an impact on me. So I'm using this palette from I Love Revolution Heartbreakers, which is all about self-love, individuality, and expression empowerment, which I thought was perfect for this topic. So growing up in the Moroccan neighborhood, I learned a lot about the Moroccan culture. And then later I found out that I also have it in my bloodline. And as I mentioned in my previous video, having this cosmopolitan face and people seeing me as an insider can be both a blessing and a curse. And that was also the case growing up in this neighborhood, because not all the time, but there were times that people would mistake me for Moroccan. And when it was Moroccans, then a lot of times, like if I would wear a top, they would call me karba, which means whore. And then when I would say I'm not Moroccan, I'm keep hearing they say like you're an effing racist, because I cannot curse on YouTube. You're an effing racist, you're ashamed of your own race. I'm not you, so I don't know. I also, like during Ramadan, which is their holy month, like I would always be wary about eating out in public, because like so many Cape that were mistaken for Moroccan were attacked. Like people would throw rocks at them, and then they would say like I'm not Moroccan, but they still wouldn't listen. And it was both good and negative living there. So I learned a lot about their culture, and it's also part of my cultural identity. Later on, I also did PR for an airline called Air Arabia Maroc. And because their main audience was Moroccans, for me it was super easy to do because I already knew so much about their culture. And so it allowed me to do a lot of cool PR events, such as organizing the first Moroccan restaurant week in the Netherlands. Our ambassador was Karim El Amadi, who was the captain for the Moroccan football team. So they did a digital treasure hunt. So I organized a lot of creative activities to promote this airline amongst the community, and I couldn't have done it if I didn't learn so much from the Moroccan culture growing up amongst them. And part of my cultural identity is definitely Brazil. Brazil has such a huge impact on who I am, and I love Brazil. I've been there so many times. I lived there for 6 months. It was always a dream of mine, because like I grew up watching Brazilian novellas, and that's also how I learned Portuguese. And You know, a lot of times people mistake me for Brazilian, and I love the culture so much. I know so much about their history as well, and also living there, like people think I'm a local, again, which is both a positive and a negative, especially when it comes to the racism. It's a negative, and the positive is that I can blend in and I will not be treated as a foreigner, and again, it can be both positive and negative. And I feel part of the culture, even though I don't have like Brazil in my bloodline, because we share the same cultural elements and we look the same. We're also a melting pot of all things. We were both colonized by the Portuguese. I feel a really strong connection with them, and I love Brazil so much. Like, to me, Brazil is also my country, and if somebody talks badly about Brazil, I also feel insulted, because I also feel Brazilian, so it's part of my cultural identity. And part of my cultural identity is also Martinique, Guadeloupe, Réunion, Guyane, because we were all connected through the music. And now I know, even after, like especially after going there, we have even more things in common, which I think is awesome. And France is part of my cultural identity because I watch a lot of French TV. And let me see what else. Like, it's such a mix, and depending who I interact with, I learn more about different cultures, so it becomes part of my global identity. So like the cultural identity transitions to global identity, which is why I chose Edouard Glissant's book Négritude, Créolité, Africanité as inspiration for my collection Africanité, Créolité, and Mondialité. So Africanité to me talks about ethnicity, where are you from, and your connection to Africa, because like for me, I believe that the first human being was originated in Africa. That's what I think. Then Créolité talks about the mix you have. We're all mixed. We have ancestors are from all parts of the world. And then Mondialité talks about we live in a multicultural society. We interact with so many different people. We consume different products. We connect with music from all over the world, so that becomes part of our global identity. And even if you live in a multicultural society, because like people tend to romanticize, like, yes, we live with so many different ethnicities here, like doesn't mean that you interact with them and that it becomes part of you. Because like growing up, I was based geographically located in a place infected with racism, because racism is a disease and all of these things. And it's not part of nor of my ethnicity, nor my cultural identity, nor my global identity. It was extremely traumatizing. And like for me, when people say like, oh, when you're born somewhere, you're from there, I don't believe that. Like, it's different for everybody. And like when I talk to people and ask them, where are you from? I love having these conversations because people have such interesting stories. And then you get to hear the whole story about it. And I remember seeing one time a video of talking about this, where are you from, and people saying they feel really insulted. I didn't understand, and in the comment people were saying that they love it when people ask them where they're from, because they see it as an opportunity to talk about their cultures, to educate people, because then you become the master of your narrative instead of letting other people talk for you. And that's how I feel as well. I don't know about you. How do you feel when people ask you, where are you from? Do you feel insulted? Do you like talking about it? I mean, even when people don't ask me, where are you from, I still find a way to talk about Cape Verde, because like a lot of people still don't know it. And depending on where I go, it's a positive or a negative to be Cape Verdean. In Holland, it has been a positive, thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't be living here anymore. And you talk about cultural identity. Rotterdam is definitely part of my cultural identity. I've been living here now for more than 10 years. And Rotterdam is also the second city in Europe with the most Cape Verdeans, Lisbon being one, and worldwide Boston is one, Lisbon is second, and Rotterdam is third. So I thought, worst case, if the local people are horrible, I have my people here. Luckily, the local people were not horrible, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And like here in the city there are more than 170 nationalities, and here you ask I think you ask so many people all the time, where are you from? And I've never met somebody who feels insulted by it. But I think it also really depends on the place, because like here I've never met people who feel insulted by it. People like talking about their culture, but when I was in France I noticed that a lot of people get offended by it or they avoid the question. And I remember one time I was in a specific location asking this woman, where are you from, more inquiring about like her roots or whatever, and she didn't want to reply. Like she talked all around it, and I was like, why is she avoiding this question? Then I'll ask later on in the conversation, like, where are your parents from? Then she replied, but I really didn't understand, like, why is it an issue to talk about where you're from or your roots or whatever? Even if you're born and raised somewhere, what is the issue? And I know, like, depending on where you are, it is problematic because of the locals. But I think that the issue isn't the question where you're from, but the intention behind it and how people treat you based on your answer. Because like if they ask you where you're from, you say local, they treat you well. And if you're like, I don't know, like from someplace else and they treat you differently, it's not the question that is the issue, but like how people perceive you based on where you're from. Because like, I mean, we're all human beings. We have different cultures, which I find fascinating. And even though I love so many cultures and like learning about it, I also had traumatic experiences with specific groups that have made me more cautious when I meet people from, like, I mean, like, it happens. You cannot completely avoid prejudices, but it's also important to keep challenging them so they don't become stagnant and turn into hate. And I think a lot of people, they tend to hold on to this stagnant idea that is based in fear. And so I love the question, where are you from? Because like I love talking about my culture, I love talking about Cape Verde and my experience, especially here when traveling, people love hearing about it. And I mean, like, you know, travelers are a different breed. You're curious, you're open-minded, and if you travel, like, that's part of the experience, learning about different cultures. And you know, the thing is, like, the story is different for everybody. So like I said, like, I don't identify with necessarily with the place where you're born. Like for me, like, I'm Cape Verdean and I see myself as a Cape Verdean world citizen, because like Cape Verdean is not only my ethnicities, my cultural identity, but it totally connects me with all these different cultures. So when they talk about the World Wide Web, which is basically the internet, for me, I also see it as the World Wide Web of cultures, because I'm connected to so many cultures. I understand it, I speak the language, I speak the culture, and it has allowed me to connect with so many people from different places and also have this conversation about ethnicity and where you're from. And it's different for everybody. I remember one time I was at an event and I was talking to this guy. It was a, I think, brown Asian guy, and I asked like, oh, where are you from? And I said like, I'm Dutch. And he's like, oh, because like you have a tan, like, and he was like, oh, it's so complicated, like, tell me, I want to hear. So he was saying that his mom, because he was already of an older age, during the war she had an affair, like some romance with a dark person, obviously because he was that color, but they don't know who this guy is and where he is from. So he had no idea what that part of his heritage was. But and then he only identifies as Dutch because that is his cultural identity, but also his geographic location and the ethnic part that he identifies with. And especially when people are mixed, like what I notice a lot of times is that the mother has the strongest imprint on somebody's cultural identity, because a lot of times that seals it for them, and other times is the geographic location or who people interact with. Because I remember seeing this video from this football player, Antoine Griezmann, like depending on where you ask it. He plays for the French football team. He's half German, half Portuguese if you look at his ethnicity, but because like at a young age he went to Spain, so like to form himself as a football player, he in one interview, which later got removed, he said that he feels more Spanish than French. And for me, like, I don't care, like if that's his story, that's fine. I always like hearing about people's stories and like why is that, but when he says it, it's not an issue because he's white. And when Benzema, who is from Kabylie, like a lot of people will say Algeria, but a lot of people from Kabylie, they say like no, it's not the same. When he says that Algeria is his country, which is true, then the extreme right-wing party says then go back to your effing country. And he got blackballed out of the French football team. After that, like he didn't play again for the French football team. And then, because the thing is like after he made that statement, there was another scandal that was like came out in the open. But I know like it was the comment he made before that triggered it all. And then they kicked him out of the team. So when he says it is a huge issue because like how dare you say this? Like they question his loyalty to France based on his statement. Whereas for me, I just like, he just acknowledges the fact that he has more than one identity. And I don't see why it should be a problem. And so a lot of times like people talk about this cultural identity crisis, like they're stuck in between two cultures, in between two worlds. I don't see why people have to choose. Why do you have to choose? Why can't we embrace it all? Because like the thing is like by embracing it all, you're more connected to the world. And thanks to the internet, we are more connected now than ever. And it gives us the possibilities to interact with more cultures. I know, for example, my nieces in Cape Verde are huge fans of BTS and Blackpink. So they're from South Korea. So that South Korea is now part of their cultural identity. I know that for sure. Because the same thing I had with Brazil, that's what they're having with, also with Brazil, of course, because it's part of Cape Verde, but also with South Korea. And I've really been loving watching South Korean soap operas lately. And I don't see what is the issue about people embracing more than one cultural identity. Especially because like we have so many interactions. And now my video got cut off and I didn't see it, so you missed probably a whole talk about the rest. I'll probably do it in another video. It got quite long anyways, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you thought of it, and I will see you in my next video.